I've had a chance to meet with some of the congregation and talk about what it means to be a reconciling congregation, how to really fully embody that commitment to be open and inclusive to all people, especially lesbian, gay, bisexual, and And so it's wonderful to be back. You've gone through quite a transformation in regard to your building, and it's just gorgeous. I love it. I'm very grateful. Chris and I are very grateful to Fran and Bill, our meeting, for their arranging for us to be here, making all the preparations for us, and hosting us, for the warm welcome that Eric has extended to us as well, and for the hospitality that Jen Sanders has provided to us. She's allowed her home to be our home while we have been visiting here in Dallas. So we're very grateful. It didn't really take me 11 years to write that. It took me 11 years to get it published. And there's a difference. No, it didn't take that long. It took me about 7 years to write it. And the rest of that time, the other 4 years, it was just trying to find a publisher. And, I've always been consoled by the fact that the writer whose name right now I can't remember, of Harry Potter, had a long, hard time getting her books published. First one. And so I feel like, maybe I'm in good company, maybe that's a good omen. What I'd like to do tonight is use my book and some of the stories in it to talk about the title of our session tonight, and that is The Church on Trial, Lesbian and Gay Witnesses. I have always believed that truly prophetic ministry comes out of pastoral ministry. It's not an academic exercise. It's not something you just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to be prophetic about this or that. People are called to be prophetic. No one chooses to be a prophet. You're called to be prophetic. I don't consider myself a prophet. I feel like I was called to be a pastor, and my response to being a pastor, I was presented with some realities that I felt compelled to address publicly and within the context of my church. And whether or not what I have done is prophetic is for someone else to decide, but I'm simply wanting to be faithful as a pastor to the women and men who were members of the congregations that I served. One member, I call Adam. This is how Adam's gift begins. I quit. I won't take it anymore. I'm leaving the church. Adam cried as he entered my office. I quickly went to him and asked him to have a seat on the couch, taking the chair across from him. He was in obvious agony, his body shaking with anger and grief. His eyes were red and swollen from crying, and they moved nervously back and forth between mine and the floor. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clenched in front of him, fingers interlocked so tightly that his knuckles were white. Why, Adam? Tell me what's happening, I said gently, calming, trying to calm and comfort him. I won't be a member of a church that thinks I'm some kind of pervert that doesn't want me. I had no clue what he was talking about. Adam, I said, tell me, who said that? Tell me, who in our church thinks you're a pervert? Who doesn't want you? Didn't you read the paper this morning? Didn't you see what they did? I've been a Methodist all of my life. Since I was 10 years old, I've given the church my time, my money, and what do I get? I had in fact read the newspaper that morning. The General Conference of the United Methodist Church was meeting in Baltimore, Maryland, and it had passed some new regulations and policies for the church. I read that it had passed a new rule that so-called self-bound practicing homosexuals could not be ordained or appointed in the United Methodist Church. I frankly was impacted by that. I had no sense that it had any relevance to me in my ministry. I was in a small town in eastern North Carolina, a very rural setting. I didn't know anybody who self-avowed as a practicing homosexual. I had never heard that language before. I didn't know what it meant. I thought perhaps it was a homosexual in training. I had no idea what it meant. Until Adam came to my office. I'd known Adam for 3 years. He was a leader in our church. He was a leader in the community. He was an educator. He was someone everyone respected and held in high regard. I thought he was very intelligent. He liked my sermons. He was a kind person, a generous person. My ideas of what a homosexual was not who I knew Adam to be. That morning, Adam revealed to me a hidden world of oppression in which people who are gay, lesbian, transgender, or bisexual suffer an insidious violence disguised as Christian morality that attacks their very beings, their very souls. It's a reality created and sustained by the claim that gay people are sick, sinful, and criminal, a claim that is declared to be God's truth in pulpits, courtrooms, and workplaces, and schoolrooms, on playgrounds, athletic fields, and street corners, and at family dinner tables. The cruelest aspect of this hidden world is that gay people internalize these demeaning proclamations and hate themselves for simply being who they are. It's a world they cannot escape and have little defense against, except to hide their sexuality and pretend to be someone they are not, or to end their lives. Adam's words rushed from his soul like water pouring through a broken dam. I listened with rapt attention, losing all track of time, as he opened to me a whole new world. He told me that as a child he would hear preachers and others in the church talk about God's unconditional love, and then hear from those same people the irreconcilable message that God hates, rejects, and condemns homosexuals to hell. He shared the story of his painful struggle to discover, understand, and accept his sexuality, first running from the self he discovered, and then later trying to, and failing to be heterosexual. He talked about the shame and guilt he felt about simply being himself. He even told me that he had considered suicide, once thinking that was the only way he could escape his homosexuality and demonstrate true repentance for it. He said that finally, after hating God or condemning him, he had chosen to trust God's unconditional love. But this only made it possible to survive. It didn't ease his pain or end his shame. I was so stunned by Adam's revelation of the abuse he experienced in the church that I no longer recall anything I said in response. But I do remember these reassuring words that came from the depths of my soul, from instinct, if not from reason. Adam, God loves you and accepts who you are. You have every reason to respect yourself and to expect others to respect you. I was sure of this as I was sure of anything that I believed. I also told him the church should never be a place where you feel attacked and scorned. I understand and support your decision to leave the church, not because I want you to leave, but because you shouldn't allow yourself to be mistreated. No one should tolerate an abusive relationship. And I said, thanks for telling me your story. Thanks for trusting me. I promise to be your pastor as long as you want me to be, even if you're not a member of this congregation. The stereotypes that I had about Adam, about homosexuals, not about Adam, but about homosexuals, what I recall when I was young, a long, long time ago. stereotypes were very negative. That they were sinful, criminal, abusive, dangerous. I learned this as a child, and what I learned as a child only got bigger. The stereotypes, the danger, the negative aspect of it is only amplified over the years, got bigger and bigger. I wasn't obsessed about it, but when I heard the word homosexual or queer, I had a negative response. But it was Adam's humanity, his integrity, the man I had known and loved and worked with for 3 years that would no longer allow me to hold those stereotypes in my mind. He shadowed me for me. His humanity, his dignity, his integrity would not allow me to hold those. Those stereotypes were incompatible with the humanity of Adam. As a pastor, my mission was to help people overcome whatever damaged them spiritually, whatever diminished their capacity to trust God's love, to love others and to love themselves. I'd never imagined sexuality to be an issue of justice, much less a spiritual one. In fact, I knew no clergy who did see it that way, although I didn't realize it immediately. Adam's visit that Wednesday set the rest of my life and ministry on a new course. Adam launched me on a journey with no clear destination and with no guide or maps to follow, other than an intuitive sense of what was right, just, and compassionate. The Great Commandment has always, for me, been one of the synthesis of all the commandments, and as Jesus said, that we are given to follow in our lives. To love God, to love our neighbor, to love ourselves. And I discovered when Adam came out to me that my church was teaching Adam and his sisters who are lesbian and his brothers who are gay to fear God, to know that they can never love and have a long-term committed relationship, and to hate themselves. Just the opposite of the Great Commandment. It occurs to me that policies, teachings of our United Methodist Church almost parallel that exactly. The incompatibility statement of our church says that there is something about you if you are same-gender loving that is unacceptable to God. You know, our United Methodist Church uses some very awkward language in its policies. Incompatible with Christian teaching is really very vague. There's no real explanation of what that means. What it is the sort of embarrassed, awkward way of getting around saying that homosexuality is a sin. It means the same thing. It has the same impact on people who are same-gender loving. So, our church has said, by vote, majority vote, that if you're same-gender loving, there's something wrong with you and you're unacceptable to God. It's also said, that you can't trust God. God calls you to ministry, and if you're lesbian, gay, or bisexual, you can't accept that call. In fact, the church won't accept it. The church will not recognize and honor God's call to you to ministry if you're a same-gender loving person. And if you find that person that you love and you want to create a family with and you want to live your life with, you want to care for and be cared for by that person, the church says we won't honor. You can't love God, you can't love yourself, you can't love another. That's what our church is doing. What an offense. What a blasphemy. After Adam came out to me, and I did a good bit of reflection and study, I always felt compelled to begin to publicly challenge the United Methodist Church in particular, but the whole Christian tradition, rather arrogant of me, but in how it has persecuted lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. So I became, known around the community as someone who was very open and affirming to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, and began to be asked to do some things. My wife Chris started the first HIV/AIDS support group in North Carolina back in 1987. And it was actually because of the AIDS support group that she and I met. That's how we happened to get together. She invited me to co-lead the support group with her back in 1989. And the second night I was there, a young man named Michael came up to me, rather embarrassed. Michael said, Jimmy, I need to apologize to you. I said, Michael, why do you need to apologize to me? He said, because I was flirting with you all night. And I didn't know you were not gay. So I need to apologize to you. And I said, oh, Michael, that's okay. I'm actually flattered. I didn't know you were flirting with me. I couldn't tell. I'm flattered that you would, want to flirt with me. And then he got really serious. His whole demeanor changed, and he got very serious. And he said, and Jimmy, I didn't know you were a minister. And I want to tell you that I'm queer. I've known I was queer since I was a child. And I know God hates me because I'm queer. I know that because I learned that at church. And I know I'm going to hell because I'm queer. And I want you to know I don't want to hear anything from you about God, the church, or anything about the Bible. I just don't want to hear it. So don't talk to me about it. The HIV/AIDS virus was in the process of destroying his body. In many ways, the church had already destroyed his soul, his spirit. He felt like an outcast, someone God did not want, someone who was unworthy of God's love, to the point he didn't want to hear anyone who might tell him. Another member of the AIDS support group was Elisha Gad. He died a couple of years later, convinced he was going to hell because of what his church had taught him. Another member of the support group, a young man named Peter, began to attend Fairmont United Methodist Church every other Sunday. He was on the other Sundays, he would be at his mom's church with his mom in a small town in eastern North Carolina. One Sunday, as he left worship, he asked me if I had lunch with him the following day. Peter was a quiet, gentle person in his late 20s, polite and neatly dressed. He was a lawyer who worked at the North Carolina Attorney General's office in downtown Raleigh. He was devoted to his mother and visited her every other weekend in their hometown. He explained that he'd been active in his hometown United Methodist Church since he was a child. Peter told me his mother didn't know that he was gay and had AIDS. Although they were close and he knew she loved him dearly, he feared her heart would break if she knew the truth about him. He also feared that if the members of the church found out, neither he nor his mother would be welcome any longer. He was sure that she'd have no support and would be isolated. He knew and understood Southern small-town culture and how it can drive away what is unfamiliar and threatening. Peter had been diagnosed with AIDS over a year before. When he first was hospitalized with a strain of pneumonia that can be deadly to people with AIDS, he told his mother that he was being treated for ulcers. He had covered subsequent episodes of his AIDS-related illnesses by saying he had flu or sinus infections, anything to hide the truth. He'd recently been at Duke Medical Center with another bout of pneumonia. He was growing weaker, he lost his appetite and was missing more and more days of work. He knew that his time was short and that he could not keep the truth from his mother much longer. Besides, he really wanted her to know all about him before his death. I encouraged him to trust his mother's love and offered to talk with her after he told her. He was going home the following weekend and planned to tell her then. Peter's mother, Ruth, called me that Sunday afternoon. She was heartsick and frightened. She just discovered that her only child, the diligent and bright student, the pride of her life, the caring, dependable, devoted son, was gay. Adding horror to shock, she learned that he was dying of AIDS. She didn't really know what she wanted to ask or say to me, but she was in no hurry to hang up the phone. Her words choked with tears, punctuated with long pauses. I told her that no mother would ask for a finer son, that Peter was a person of dignity and integrity of whom she could always be proud. I assured her that God loved Peter unconditionally. After a long pause, she thanked me and said goodbye. When Peter's health began a rapid decline, Ruth moved to Raleigh to take care of him. The day after she arrived, she called and asked to see me. That afternoon, she greeted me with a warm and weary smile and invited me to sit in Peter's living room. She needed to tell me a story. One Sunday morning, months before, when Peter was visiting her, they were sitting together reading the Raleigh News and Observer. There was an article on the controversy about me and my ministry with gay people and people with AIDS. I just can't understand how a minister could associate with that kind of people, Ruth said, she told Peter. Her church and culture had taught her that that kind of people was undesirable and should be shunned. Peter didn't respond, she said. He didn't even look up from the newspaper, but just sat quietly reading, and they never discussed the article or her comment. When Peter told her he was gay and had AIDS, she immediately remembered her comment to him that Sunday. She apologized to me for saying it and thanked me for supporting Peter, but what really broke her heart, what she could not forgive herself for, was that she had said what she had to Peter, her precious son, only later to learn that he was that kind of being. She blamed herself for giving Peter reason to fear she would reject him, reason to conceal the truth from her for so long. If only he had told me, could have told me, she grieved, I could have taken care of him, could have been with him and helped him during all this time he's been sick. Help me, she pleaded, putting her face in her hands and crying. I knelt beside her, took her hands, and spoke to her about her love for Peter and his for her, and putting the past behind her, giving him the love and care she could now during his dying. I assured her that God was with her and Peter, and that they would not be alone. I went with Ruth to Peter's bedroom to visit with him for a few minutes before leaving. We held hands and prayed. My spoken prayer was for Peter, for his comfort and peace. My silent prayer was for Ruth, who believed she betrayed the person she loved most in the world. Peter was loved, and he knew it. He no longer feared being rejected and abandoned by his mother. Medications had taken away his pain. He was comfortable and prepared to die. Death was no longer an enemy, but a friend that could set him free from the awful scourge of AIDS. But Ruth would live with the pain that she could not escape, a pain that no drug could numb or cure. She needed prayer that day for the days to come without Peter, the days of remembering how long he had suffered without her knowledge and support. The persecution of lesbian and bisexual men and people in by the church affects not them alone, it affects their families, their parents, their sisters and brothers. It tears families apart. If this is not a justice issue, what could be for the church? We are so often thinking of causes for justice as being outside of the church, that we come to the church to energize ourselves, to equip ourselves, to mobilize ourselves, and go out into the world to take on the injustices of the world. And the injustice inside, sometimes, we ignore or feel unable to challenge. When you may know, I sort of have the glorious distinction of having been put on trial twice. In my first trial, I was asked, because one of the charges against me was I had broken covenant with my clergy colleagues with the conference. So I was asked what were my defense counsel. What were the important covenants that I had? And the first one, of course, is my baptism covenant, in which, and of course I was an infant when I was baptized, sprinkled. It was a thing. In my name, my parents pledged that I would resist evil in whatever form it takes and wherever it is. And I reaffirm that baptismal promise all the time. And I do not exclude the church as a place where evil can be found. One of the things I learned early in my life, particularly living in a very rigidly racist society, was how the church could be guilty of perpetuating injustice and evil. It was the church in the South that was primarily responsible for giving the theological foundation for slavery and then racial segregation and injustice. We have to live with it. We have to acknowledge that we, as part of the church, have that as part of our heritage, our legacy. We have to acknowledge it, and we have to continue to say it was wrong. In the very same way, we have to recognize that the church has been the primary vehicle for the prejudice and bigotry against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. The church has given the solid theological undergirding for that bigotry that has continued for almost a millennium. Because it has been around so long doesn't mean it's okay. It is time for us to end. It is time for us to say, it has been wrong from the beginning, it is wrong now, and we will not continue to allow the church, in the name of God and in the name of Jesus, to persecute lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. The stories I have that I can share are very similar to the ones that I have read there in the book. It is a memoir, but it's really more about the people who I encountered who really changed me, who opened my eyes, who made me aware of things I would otherwise not have known. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. And what I like to recognize, what I like to say, what I am certain of and I'm convinced of profoundly, is that lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people provide a redemptive presence within the United Methodist Church and all churches. Amen. Your presence here, those of you who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, whether you realize it or not, whether you're even doing anything about it, your presence is a redemptive presence in the church. Without you, there is no hope for the church. The church cannot be saved from its bigotry and from its lack of integrity. The church cannot authentically speak about the love of God, the inclusive love of God, until it has regained its integrity. And the presence of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people within the church makes it possible for that to happen. The churches that have changed, the people, the persons that have changed because they got to know someone who was lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Adam changed my life. Peter changed his mother's life. I can go on and tell you other stories about how people have changed. But lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people have been and are and will always be a redemptive presence within the church. Sometimes, and I know, if you're lesbian or gay or bisexual or transgender, you kind of get tired of hearing us as non-gay people talking about it. But we need to talk about it because we recognize that maybe in this place that is safe, that there are places that are not safe. And we can't be content about just being safe here. This is a wonderful reconciling congregation. This congregation has made a tremendous commitment to truly being inclusive and affirming and reconciling, to be a witness to the Dallas community and to the world. But we can't just feel comfortable here. There is a world out there that's hostile, that's not welcoming. There are United Methodist churches that are hostile and not welcoming. We are called to be agents of change, whether gay or non-gay. We are called as a community of faith, together, to be that change. Beginning here, but then moving out. It's been pointed out to me so well how the cross of us exists both here in the sanctuary and out in the world. It goes from here with us through the roof into the world. That is what we're called to do. That is who we should be. Bill is asking for some practical to-dos. I don't really know how to say to Northaven, since we do so much already. But I think we can all reaffirm our commitment to truly being reconciling and inclusive, to really being authentic witnesses to God's inclusive love in everything we do, in every way we do it. I know there are some of you here visiting from other churches. There are resources for you through the Reconciling Ministries Network that helps congregations go through a process of discerning whether they can become a reconciling congregation. Of course you can, but whether you will to, whether you choose to. It used to be it was only congregations that could make that decision. Now it can be Sunday school groups, it could be in North Carolina. We for so long didn't have a reconciling congregation, so we had reconciling United Methodists. We called ourselves Rungs. Just people from scattered all over the state who needed to be together, who needed a way to make a commitment to making the church open and inclusive and helping the church regain its integrity. That's a possibility. But to live it out, when you make the commitment to to truly live it out in very concrete ways. Let it always be in the forefront of your mind, because we are at a transitional point in our history, both as a church and as a country and across the world. We all see the signs that we're moving, and I think inevitably toward being a culture, a society that is truly inclusive and affirming of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. But we've got a long way to go. A good bit, we've got a long way to go. I don't think it can be reversed. I think the movement is of God. I think there's no question about that. And I don't think God can be resisted, even by the church. But given that confidence, that strong hope, that faith in the future, we still have to live our days every day. Helping schools deal with bullying, helping young people who are feeling isolated, struggling with their sexual identity or sexuality, not knowing who to talk to, not knowing who they can trust. We need to find safe places for people to be themselves, where they can trust God's love, where they can love themselves, and when they can know one day they will have someone they will love, and they can stand in the sunshine of God's glory and celebrate with great pride the commitment and love to one another. Thank you.
Jimmy, I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to acknowledge you publicly a gift you've offered me. About 20 years ago, we were in the reign of Jesse Combs, North Carolina. I was minister visiting Full Memorial Baptist Church, and proud to be a member of that congregation. At that point, the first congregation, perhaps in Rockland State, I don't know, to take on the idea of doing same-sex unions. And it was right at this time, I think it really came up 20 years ago. And I'd like to publicly thank you for being the only minister in town that stood by us, and my colleague Megan Cyber. And you haven't spoken at all really about all the things you've been through, but I know that was it made it difficult for you to stay in Raleigh, and because of their support, and that you still along with us at that point, and the congregation was doing fine for us. All the dire things that we predicted didn't happen as far as the year was, and still have a strong tie to that congregation. So, and the rumors were interesting. Nate and I were in a relationship together, and all sorts of things. We thought it was a badge of honor. But I've had this opportunity to thank you publicly for your support again during the reign of Jesse Combs.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you. Full Memorial Baptist Church in Raleigh, North Carolina is one of the wonderful congregations in the country. It did go through almost a year-long process of discerning whether it would provide public ceremonies to saints and their couples. And by a vote of the congregation, it was overwhelmingly approved. And almost immediately, the North Carolina Baptist Convention disfellowship the Fuller Memorial. And then soon after its next national meeting, the Southern Baptist Convention disfellowship the Fuller Memorial Baptist Church, which both were badges of honor. So it is a courageous congregation. Amen. Simon, who was the pastor, and was a very courageous colleague and a dear friend. Another question.
Hi, Jimmy. My name is Jane, and I come to you from a different faith tradition. I come to you from the Catholic Church. I'm so glad to be here. You guys are so much cooler than the church. But a couple things. I think that we have a lot of don't ask, don't tell going on in our churches and our faith communities. I worked for 5 years as an HIV/AIDS therapist from 1990 to 95. One of my clients was a music minister who was outed and was fired from his ministry in his church. I have had dear friends in my church that have left because of everything that you have spoken about, that basically they have been told that they are not welcome. My church has a way of dealing with homosexuality. They say, God loves you as long as you are not sexual. As long as you're celibate, you're okay. And I think that is inhuman and unjust. And my question is, how in the world do we tackle such lies and denial in such bureaucracies that are living lives and unwilling and getting more and more closed-minded about inclusiveness of any kind, race, sexuality, disability, gender, etc. Thank you. Thank you for your work. And I'm buying 2 books. One to have recorded for myself and one to lend.
That's a tall order you just give to me. First of all, one thing I would want to say in regard to Roman Catholics in America is that recent polling has shown that 74% of Catholic laity support marriage or civil unions for same-sex. And that's a higher percentage than any other Christian body. It's a higher percentage than any Protestant body. And so that is something that you can feel good about. The bad part of that is the Roman Catholic Church is not a democratic institution. It's sort of becoming like the Methodist Church, I think. The Roman Catholic Church is, controlled from the top down. The Vatican bishops, the Vatican chooses the bishops, the cardinals are the bishops. And so, if you listen to the hierarchy, the Roman Catholic Church is very close, very adamant that sexual orientation, while a natural, inherent aspect in personality, is an inclination toward something that's wrong or sinful. And so you can't act on it if you're lesbian or gay. You cannot be sexually active, is what the Roman Catholic Church teaches. So that is, as you say, Jane, it's really a harmful thing for them to teach. It's inhumane. It is saying that a part of who you are is to be ignored and deprived of any kind of real expression. So, I think we have to, in every regard, be sure that we do not allow people to make claims that we know to be false. That when we hear them, we challenge them right away. It takes a lot of courage, especially in social situations, to do that. But it's not going to stop until we start challenging, until we have the courage to begin in the most intimate of our relationships, our neighbors, our families, to say, I don't believe that. I consider that to be a really harmful thing that you're saying. that simple thing needs to be done. In regard to policies of the church, I think those who support the change need to identify one another and begin to organize and let it be known. I mean, it's like anything else. It's like what we're seeing now in this country, in Occupy Wall Street. There has to be an expression, otherwise people think, well, you're just content with it. You're going to let it go. You're going to let everything happen. It doesn't really matter. You've got to let it know. You've got to let people know who do the offending that it does matter. And that's a very inadequate response to a very challenging question that you had. But maybe that's the best I can do tonight. Yes. I think this woman is right here. I think there's a line that's Yes.
First, I want to say, I want to disagree with something you said, because we never get tired of hearing you and people like you talk about us. It has more weight coming from a straight person, from an ally, a different kind of weight, and especially from spiritual leaders like you and Carlton Pearson and a lot of other people. I have two things I wanted to say. That first of all, I represent a small but growing church in the Mid-Cities area, which is a UCC congregation, and which is reconciling in a brand new way. I think we're kind of on the cutting edge, so I'm proud to be a part of that.
What is the name?
Well, it's a branch of the Cathedral Pope, and only in the sense that we started, it's a church plant, but we're really quite different even from that. And so we just are modeling the way that all different kinds of people, not just gay people and straight people, all kinds of people, disabled people of all colors, ethnic groups, even religious backgrounds, because not everybody in our group is Christian. And the other thing I wanted to say is that a woman who had been working closely with our church for 6 months and who had just graduated from Perkins, magna cum laude, with a master's degree in theology, was killed in an automobile accident 2 weeks ago. It's a horrible, horrible thing. But I just learned that 63 people from her family came to a memorial service at Cathedral Pope in Dallas on Saturday. But I just learned that her family was very split on the issue of her gayness. One side of the family was accepting and loving of her, and the other side was very disapproving, and there had been a schism in the family over this. And that schism was changed by the memorial service. And there's been healing in that family. I just hope that there'll be a time soon when we don't have to wait for somebody to die.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. My name is Elaine. I'm African and gay, and I want to read the book. But the question this evening is, it's about my mother. Are you thinking about the book to be translated in other languages? I'm tired of anytime I call and my mom is telling me, there's this parent who came to me and told me about his son and blah, 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 what should I do? And I'm like, okay, you should tell her this and this and this. But it would be a great help if your book could be translated in other languages so that she can be able to read it herself and be able to help other people. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Some folks here may not have heard that 100 Methodist ministers, I think many of them women, have recently signed a pledge saying they were going to perform same-sex marriages in their church. I don't know much more about it than that. Can you elaborate?
There actually is a movement. Thank you for making that point. There is a movement among United Methodist clergy in the the Northeast and in the central part of the country and on the West Coast to defy the United Methodist Church's policy prohibiting clergy from marrying or conducting what the church calls homosexual unions. And it's marvelous. And one of the things that has sort of sparked this is the fact that more and more states, I think there are 6 states that provide marriage or civil unions, marriage, and plus the District of Columbia, and then there are others that provide civil unions. And so clergy in those areas are refusing to deny members of their congregation the right for marriage ceremonies. You know, they're not going to say, okay, if you're heterosexual, we'll do a marriage for you, but if you're not heterosexual, we want. They're not going to divide their congregations, so they're committed publicly to provide these services. In September, I preached at Founder United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C. For the 1-year anniversary of that congregation voting to provide marriage ceremonies for same-gender couples. And they did this in a very public vote. The bishop was notified in advance. It was a charge conference. The district superintendent was there. It was all done in the way you do the normal things as the United Methodists. And since then, they've had 7 marriages in the sanctuary for same-gender couples by the clergy of that congregation. And nothing has happened. First of all, the building didn't fall in. There have been no complaints or charges brought against any of the clergy. The bishop and the district superintendent have been informed. I think that, again, the church or people in the church are becoming very frustrated and impatient that we haven't changed our policy. And they're finding creative ways to work around the now. This is like you're taking it on head-to-head. In the Northern Illinois Conference, where I think civil unions are provided, the annual conference voted this past June that the maximum penalty that will be imposed upon any clergy person found guilty of conducting what the church calls a homosexual union is a suspension of 24 consecutive hours. So what they're doing is they okay, in case of all, we'll just make it as inconsequential, as painless as possible. Amy DeLong was convicted of conducting a ceremony for 2 women in Wisconsin back in June. She was given a 30-day suspension. And she was told she had to write a paper on how people, clergy who disagree can get together and celebrate. So I think there's some creative things being done. Now, we're in the South and Southeast. This is not the same situation. Eric has said you're geographically challenged here. This is not the same situation as in the Northeast or the central part of the country or the West Coast. But there are clergy here also. I just spoke at a little church in Birmingham, Alabama, at the invitation of its pastor. There had been a book study group reading Adam's Gift over 3 weeks and invited me to come there for the 4th and final session of their book study and to talk about what I talked to you about tonight. And so this is, I'm sorry, it's my prejudice. I never thought that I would be invited to Birmingham, Alabama to talk about this, but I was, and they were very receptive, and they are very concerned that they too can do something to end the persecution of lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people.
Can you speak a little bit about the idea of splitting the church over this issue, either within Western countries or within Western and African countries, and whether you are favorably inclined or not?
Before you leave the mic, are you talking about the church like splitting because of disagree or some kind of organic division so that there's alternative autonomy by various parts of the church?
Either one.
Okay. Well, thank you for your question. You do know, I'm sure, that those of you who are United Methodists know that we are an international church. We have United Methodist churches in the U.S., in Africa, in Indonesia, and certain Eastern European countries, and I think in England. I'm not sure. Actually, we have English. Do you know if we have any churches in England? They're separate. That's in, yeah, all times. In any event, when the General Conference meets, we have delegates from all of those areas, and they vote, on these policies that govern all of us, wherever we live in the world. The culture in the United States is very different from the culture in Africa, and Indonesia, and so the folks who come, the delegates who come from Africa and Indonesia, come with a different perspective. There is a great deal of change here in terms of understanding and actually exposure to people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, and consequently a change of attitudes and perspective. That has not happened in Africa and Indonesia. And so the votes on these policies, these negative policies, anti-gay policies in our discipline, have been maintained primarily because of votes coming from Africa and Indonesia. There are significant votes also to uphold these policies coming from the U.S. I don't want to say that we're victims of votes from Africa and Indonesia. We could repeal these policies if we had the votes in this country, and we need to work to get those votes. But that causes, because there's some cultural differences, it makes voting on policies that are one size fits all very difficult and painful. Now, the other sort of idea of divide or division is what many folks who want to maintain the status quo refer to. The folks who want to maintain the status quo in the United Methodist Church use the fear of the church dividing as sort of a way of trying to discourage people from changing these policies. I'm sure that there will be people who will leave the United Methodist Church if we change these policies. There are people leaving the United Methodist Church now because of these policies. The church is already split. We have had lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people as members of the United Methodist Church forever, but they suffered in silence. All we are doing now is recognizing them. We're recognizing the harm the church is doing and welcoming them to be out and full members of the congregation. So it's not like something new is happening. We're simply recognizing them. It's not like they're suddenly gays in our midst. That's always been the case. We're recognizing now that they are here and the harm we've done to them. So I see the talk of division as a fear tactic, as a way of trying to discourage folks. And frankly, it's disingenuous because people who are using that language are the ones who are going to choose to leave themselves. It's not somebody else they're talking about. It's saying, if you make this change, we'll leave. That's their choice. That's their choice. I'm not choosing for them to leave. They will choose. Yeah.
I had the honor of listening to you at the cathedral several years ago. I can't remember how long ago it was, and you were my hero then, and you're my hero now. And thinking of trying to do something to call attention to the movement, maybe there could be the person of integrity of the year of Time Magazine or whatever. I'd want you to receive it, and I'd want the former chief of staff, Edwin Mullen, to also receive it. The day I heard him at a Senate committee hearing, I knew the battle was over because there was the highest man speaking out with a great amount of integrity. And it just, the after don't tell us after, well, it was not as big as the deal as him speaking out. In General Trades, I think it was going to say about the same thing later, but Cain would let him testify. And that would have been head of CIA. But as a former Air Force officer that fought the battle for 2 years in 68 and 69 and came out and fought for it, I've lived for all these years hoping to see change. And I've been so angry for so many years, but it's always going to rise up. I never got around to it. And now I've forgotten how angry I am.
I thought the American Baptist and the United Methodist were the liberal versions. The reason I came here was I heard on the bank program, I thought I could be saying, I'm not sure you were saying, the comparison between the racial situation, which I wasn't involved with back in the 50s, the late 50s. And I thought it was, I was expecting to see something that was like he was closer to 70 men.
I think it was the 70s.
But you went a little bit after. And of course, when the child comes out of the womb, you know what the color is. He had no choice whatsoever. And I think it's the same, I think most of us realize it's the same with someone who is gay or lesbian or straight. That's the same thing. I think that's what you were comparing to, which I like the comparison.
Yes, thank you very much. I can't actually recall what I did say yesterday.
You didn't get close to all of that, but you had first talking about black and racial, and then you had this one, had the gay, lesbian, right after that, I thought it was a comparison with which I hope it was.
It was what I think I was looking to say, and maybe I did, but I can't remember if I actually said it. What I was looking to say was that when I discovered what the church was doing to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, and how the church was using the claim that it's God's will that people be heterosexual, that homosexuals are not acceptable people, and that the Bible teaches that, and that the church is going to stand for that position, it was for me an echo of what I heard when I was a child about it was God's will for races to be separate. The Bible says they should be separate, and it's an offense to God if the races came together. It was the same kind of use of religious language, the use of the name of God, the use of the Bible to hold up an injustice, to perpetuate an injustice. I think maybe
That's what I'm
good. Thank you for giving me another opportunity. Yes, sir.
I'm going to give you some real encouragement. I'm pastor of the United Methodist Church. A year and a half ago, largely through the leadership and initiative of some of our deacons, we became public about our inclusivity. And it has been a real turning point in the life of our church. We lost some members. We've gained wonderful new members. I wouldn't trade back. We did get kicked out of the BGCT, which is the Baptist General Convention of Texas, but we took those letters and just reformed the GLB. I'd like to say to some of you who think there can be nothing good about being Baptist, free church movement that's a part of our Baptist heritage is what made that possible in our situation. And we celebrate that kind of freedom. So if any of you know gay and lesbian Baptists who don't want to change denomination, please keep us.
It's interesting how polity both handcuffs you and also sets you free. And the United Methodist policy, because we are a connectional church, which means the General Conference makes the rules for us all, we're connected, we have to be accountable to one another, creates some limitations for us. The autonomy of the congregational polity of the Baptist Church allows the congregation to make some very significant decisions and to be accountable to itself and responsible for its own mission and vision. That's what. Yes.
I'm a Disciples of Christ minister in the neighborhood.
Wonderful.
And I'm privileged to serve a denomination that we have the same kind of luxury. But when you started talking about the vote, getting out the vote, I was down this way and around the corner before I realized you had gone that way. This past summer, I had the privilege of being a participant in the Human Rights Campaign's National Clergy Holiday. And there were bunches of us from all over the country, all different denominations, that went to our congresspeople and our senators and pleaded the case for those legislative bills that would be more supportive of the LGBT community. And one thing I was reminded about then was to get out the vote is an important thing. It certainly is an important thing. And the Pew study, which you cited earlier, is indicating that people are ready for a lot of changes that Congress is reluctant to make. So, I suggest that you and your friends who are like mine write to your congresspeople and your senators. It's the volume of mail that makes the difference. It's the volume of mail. And if you sit down and write it out by hand, it'll have a lot more impact than an email. I get these things every day about please support this cause and push your button. And I do. But I think that know it is much more impactful. And you'll be helping two causes. You'll be helping the LGBT community and you'll be helping the United States Postal Service.
Saying what you did, I have focused tonight entirely on the injustice of churches that way. And there are some very important possibilities for change in civil government that we need to focus on. And I'm glad that you brought again that to our attention. And one of the reasons that members of Congress and our state legislators around the country have been, have used to justify not providing full equality to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people are religious teachings. And so we need to let them know when we write those bills that we are faithful Christians, Jews, Muslims, whatever we are, that we are people of faith who believe in the inherent dignity of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people and their rights under the Constitution to have full rights. I was once the lobbyist for the North Carolina Council of Churches, and we were given the same, we learned the same thing, that legislators respond to handwritten notes. And you might even put your coffee cup and leave a coffee ring on there. It makes it even more impressive.
I'm also a member of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and when my daughter-in-law to be said, people asked her, who are they? She said, just think Methodist is a lot of I fell under that. I also serve on the board of the Bryan Community School in Fort Worth, and I come to understand that the way we talk about God's love for the LGBT community has a lot to do with whether we advance the conversation. And you have given us language, ideas, and challenged us so that hopefully meaningful conversation and then action will come from that. Thank you for your personal sacrifice. Thank your family for their personal sacrifice, for your commitment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm a holy listener, a spiritual director, and I lived for many years on the island of Kauai. And I became known as the AIDS lady. I was a member of a long poem which brought in gay men, wonderful young men, who came to our island to die. Who came to our island to die. And I was one of those who embraced them and became their mom. And what I want to say is, if you can't do anything else, you can offer affirming love. You can offer affirming love. And when somebody snarky makes a queer remark about those queers, you can say something like, let me tell you about Stephen. Let me tell you about this wonderful young man who sobbed into my chest because he was never going to be like his military father and 4 brothers. And I could tell him he was loved. Thank you.
I am what could be described as a cradle to the grave United Methodist. Anything ever happens to this church, I'll just form my own and read John Wesley's sermons, and that'll be okay. I am the daughter of a United Methodist pastor. I am the sister of a gay United Methodist. I am the mother of a lesbian United Methodist. But I am also a United Methodist pastor that serves a rural church in the South. Can you offer any advice? Can you offer any advice on how to gently but firmly and preferably covertly turn them into a reconciling congregation before they go?
Are giving me some call. One of the things that I come to believe is that you're often surprised when you try something that you thought was not going to work, it was going to smack you back in the face if you tried. My guess is, and again, as a pastor, you do it in a pastoral way. A loving way, not a pacifying way, not a, okay, I want to make you feel happy and comfortable kind of way, but a truthful but loving way. Begin to talk about people who are same-gender loving, who are children of families. One of the things that is often discovered is that there are families with gay children who nobody knows in every congregation because they are afraid to talk about it. I just, a week ago yesterday, spoke to a women's book study club at United Methodist Church in Raleigh. I was the associate pastor there from 1970 to 73. And the women who were studying Adam's Gift, who had all read Adam's Gift before I came up to discuss it with them, were women who were members of the church way, way back then. So they were in their 70s and 80s. They were the ones who kind of, as I just had come out of seminary, they were the ones who gave me support how do they minister and passion. And they are all excited about trying to help the industry become a reconciling congregation. I would have never thought that would be where the beginning of a reconciling movement in the industry would happen. One of the women said, you know, what we have to do, start doing, is talking to each other about our family members who are lesbian and gay. We don't do that. We all have to, but we don't talk about it. You cannot be so rural that there are not some gay people around. And you can, I think what was just said before you about humanizing the people, whatever other characteristics they may have, whether they're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or whatever, humanize them, give them a name. That's one of the things I wanted to do in the book, is tell stories, because that gives reality, humanity, to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, rather than just sort of an abstract, theological, biblical treatise. I don't know if that's helpful, but you find and you identify the most supportive people in your congregation, and you sit down and you talk to them, the people you think would be most supportive. Now, they'll probably bring up this whole idea of division again. You know, like, oh, the church is going to split, they can't take it, they won't. But if you talk to enough, one-on-one, and then you get them together and talk, you may find that they may not vote to be a reconciling congregation, but the whole attitude and the sense of welcome may be profoundly changed. Yes, sir.
I am here from the Catholic Church. Actually, my entire family converted when I was 40, so I don't remember any pre-Catholic events. But I discovered Rome was very much against my lifestyle. And I pretty much walked away from the Catholic Church, ready to just put it all behind me. And I found dignity values. People who were being Catholic and gay at the same time. You can imagine that. We have a very small community right now. We are in regrouping because our numbers are down. You know, the gay Catholics are our motto is the traditions you love, the acceptance you deserve. One word has to be convert. My mother and I were driving around late in the night, and we were lost. And she happened to see a street sign and said, we used to live on that street. She made me circle the block and she pointed out the house and all this. On the way out of the neighborhood, we passed a little church. And she said, that's where your dad got saved. And I thought, oh, a story. Did y'all used to go to that church? And she said, no. He stormed out of the house. I got in the car and tried running down and running in that car.
I'm a Baptist. I'm a Baptist. I'm a Baptist here. Nothing things that's good. I'm being part of the radio the other day. I remember you saying that the references to homosexuality in the Bible are only the ones about violence and then about putting another above God in terms of Sodom and Gomorrah and Leviticus and Romans. Can you kind of talk about that? I didn't hear the whole thing we're talking about on the radio.
Yeah. I'll briefly tell you how I understand those few references to same gender, sexual intimacy in the Bible. First of all, there is no legitimate use of the Bible to condemn same gender loving relationships. There are a few references to same gender behavior, sexual behavior. Primarily the Genesis, Sodom and Gomorrah story, a couple of references in Leviticus, chapter 1 of Romans. Some people say 1 Corinthians and 1 Timothy. I don't agree with those. I think they are not related to the same-gender sexual behavior. Because the words used and often translated to be either sodomite or homosexual are Greek words nobody knows the meaning of. There are no clear equivalents in English to those Greek words. Those are words that Paul used that nobody used before him or after him, so we really don't know what Paul is talking about. And so it's very unfair to use the word homosexual, which was only invented in the late 1800s. I mean, nobody went around in biblical times talking about homosexuals in either Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek. They just didn't have the word for it. The Sodom and Gomorrah story is a story about violent rape, about violence. It's not about same-gender loving relationships. It's not even about homosexuality. It was a practice in the ancient world for men to rape men, to humiliate them, to treat them like women, and that was the most humiliating thing they could do. That's what that story is about. Leviticus is about being different from your neighbors. Don't imitate your neighbors. The religions practiced by the people who lived around Israel, around the people of Israel, were fertility religions. I want to make sure everybody's old enough in here for me to say this. One of the things they did, to practice their religion, was for men to have intercourse with men and women in the temple to enhance the fertility of the earth. And so, from the Hebrew perspective, for a man to have sex with a man was like imitating the worship of these fertility religions. The other aspect of it was going back to the idea of humiliation. If a man assumes the role of a woman in a sexual relationship, he violates his role as a man in the community, and it's an offense. And for a man to treat a man like a woman is an act of humiliation, and that's an offense to the community. First, Romans picks up that same theme of the idolatry, of worshiping. It's all about worshiping other gods in First Romans, and one of the things that Paul says is that people who worship other gods also practice same-gender sexual behavior. It's not about same-gender loving relationships. So, the Bible says nothing about it. It's quiet. Now, we could have 1 or 2 semester studies on those things, and there would be a lot of argument and disagreement. But the main thing I would say in conclusion is, you cannot read the Bible without interpreting it. You read one word of the Bible and you're immediately interpreting what you've read. And people are going to interpret the Bible in different ways. So the important thing is that the bottom line is how do we use the Bible, not so much how we read it, but how we use it. Do we use it to do harm to people? Do we use it to justify discrimination and bigotry? Do we use it to tell people that they are inherently sinful? If so, that's not the Bible either. That's not how the Bible is to be used. It should not be used that way. It's an offense against the Bible to use it that way. So how we use the Bible is extremely important to think about. Now, there were some other points I wanted to make that suddenly went away. They got carried away. But that's pretty much it. Marty.
My name is Marty Soper, and I'm a pastor at Greenland Hills United Methodist, a small church down there, SMU, and very open and affirming community. And we have members of the gay, lesbian, and bisexual and transgender community who are active in our church in every possible way. And so when I came to the church 7 years ago, it was probably 12 or 15 years ago that the church voted to throw open the doors and make it known in the community that this was a place where everybody was welcome. But they did not vote to be reconciled in congregation. And so I wondered if you would comment on what that label buys you as a congregation in the United Methodist Church, politically and in every way, because that is beginning to be more of a conversation in our congregation, which I'm delighted to see, but I wondered if you would just comment on that.
In our denomination, it has become a very significant thing for a congregation to self-identify itself and vote to be a reconciling congregation. It's significant as a way of communicating to the larger community that you truly are welcoming and inclusive of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people and others. It's a comprehensive statement, but because we have chosen to use that term reconciliation and associate it with lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, that is right now in this current time in history, that is the real distinct message that is being communicated by that. It's important for a congregation, when that vote is taken, they're doing more than just taking on a name for themselves. They've gone through a process, they've done some discernment, they've had a conversation, they've talked about what it means and how to live it out. So there's a whole lot that goes into that, a whole lot of nurturing and preparation that precedes the vote. It's important that after the vote is taken to live that out, to really embody it. So it's an important message to the community, to those who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, and to those who are non-gay, who are supportive, that this is a congregation that's going to welcome us, and we're going to be able to be at home here, we can be our authentic selves, we don't have to pretend to be someone who we're not. It's important for the congregation itself because they have gone through this process and made this commitment, and it's actually a very profound vote. It really makes a difference in the life of the congregation. And in regard to the denomination, the more reconciling congregations we have, the greater the witness is being made that there are people everywhere across this country, places you would not suspect, that are voting to be reconciled. And that's a very profound political comment or statement, witness for the United Methodist Church. Chris.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to say thank you for the great Texas hospitality that you've shown us while we've been here. We really appreciate it. And we really look forward to hearing what you all are going to do with this issue. We've learned what you're doing now, but we look forward to hearing what you're going to take away from this and what you're going to keep doing, because we're all in this together, and each one of us working and doing our part can make a big difference. And we would like to stay in touch. If you're on Facebook, Jimmy is on Facebook. You can go to Jimmy Creech, author of Adam's Gift. Or if you're just on email, I'll be glad to take your email down tonight and we can stay in touch, and I can let you know where Jimmy's going to be speaking. He is available to speak anywhere, so please be in touch with us and we'll be in touch back. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here it is. All our pastors here tonight, including Judith Reedy from one of our churches I see over here. And Shane Cox, the former pastor of that church, is retired and doesn't have to go anywhere. I'm stunned that he came tonight, so we're grateful for that. I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege to talk about something. People are always asking about action items when we are here in these kind of places. Several people have said, what you can do in your particular church. We happen to have a suggestion here from Northaven Church that we'd like to share with you briefly about your story about Adam is such a powerful story and resonates deeply with me because I've heard similar stories here. In fact, the truth that we keep telling is that we are losing members now. Our church has lost dozens and dozens of members over the past few years. Members in general conference. I grace this because we lose more members. It is a miracle of God that we continue to grow with as many members as we lose over these issues. But
we cannot forget those who are gone. And I think part of why we fight is for them. How many people have heard a story like Adam's story in their lives? I'm not surprised by that, sadly. One thing we can do to further the conversation is to further the conversation. And what we have done here at Northaven Church is to be first very moved by this DVD, For the Bible Tells Me So. How many people have heard of this powerful documentary? This is the story of 5 families, and it was by Daniel Parsley. 5 families, Christian families, and their struggle to come to terms with having a gay or lesbian person in their family and what it meant for their families and their understanding of the Bible. We thought that it would be a great conversation piece, and so we have created a companion study for that DVD called This I Know. It's a 5-week study, a 6-week study, and it includes chapters by several very well-known theologians. Vic Furnish, retired professor from Perkins, wrote the chapter. There's a chapter on the Bible, and Vic Furnish wrote that. There's a chapter from Marcus Ward. We're very honored to have Marcus Ward write a chapter here. And the opening chapter is from Brian McLaurin, who many people know in the ecumenical world. Brian McLaurin was willing to join us in this study. And in fact, this was his first public word on homosexuality to offer his thoughts in this study. It's available for purchase at thisiknow.org, and it would be a great study in your church or in a small group or just a pass to somebody else in some other church that you might know. And there are flyers about it immediately outside the door here that you can pick up tonight. There should be enough for everybody to get a flyer. Finally, I'm going to hold up this one final time and remind you that there are copies of Adam's gift out there, and Cody actually walked back out already, but immediately out the door into the atrium. You'll see the book table, and we encourage you to head to the atrium to continue conversation, to meet Jimmy and talk with him more. Jimmy, we're deeply